If you go to like a good restaurant, right? There's a head chef. Do you think every dish that comes to your table is made by the head chef? Answer is no, right? He's there to orchestrate it.
When you do delegate, try and be as clear as possible of what is the goal of this task.
That's the key.
Right? That's the key.
You have to set up the person for success. It's not just assigning the work and expecting it to get done. End of the day, it's your team. You have to make sure you have their best interest.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Our Tech Chronicles. This is episode 15, and we're going to get into the details of the art of delegation. We're going to talk about why delegation matters. We'll talk about why do some leaders struggle with delegation, right? And then we'll get into the meat of it, which is how to delegate, and end with stories. Does that sound good?
That's great.
Before we get started, um, has there ever been an instance where you've tried to delegate something and it goes the full round and comes back to you?
Oh, that's an amazing question. I have to think about. Let me see. The full circle, right?
The full circle.
I can't think. I can't think of anything. How about you?
It has happened once. This is when my early days as a leader, and I was very happy that I had delegated this to someone, and and I clearly made some mistakes with following up as well, and then that went to another person, and it ended up back at me.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
All right, let's get started. Um, why is delegation important?
Yeah. So Roshan, delegation is a word we hear all the time, like in the leadership context. But how often I wonder, like, we stop to think about, like, what does it really mean? And also, as we know, leaders struggle to delegate, especially if you are like a new manager. And sometimes it's not because you don't want to delegate, just because you feel like it's just easier to do it myself. Right. So I think the why delegation matters. I think it's because when you become a manager, when you become a leader, your role changes significantly. Right. And part of the expectation from you is that, is very different from what you used to do as an individual contributor. And you are really expected to, leverage your team to become much more efficient. You are expected to solve complex issues for the entire team. So that's why I think the delegation plays a big role. Like, you need to be effectively delegate tasks to other people, in one part to leverage your capacity, at the same time to leverage your team's skill set. So as a team you're performing, not as an individual.
That's very true and spot on. Maybe I can add to that, right? As you become a leader, you start thinking more strategic, and so your what's on your plate is like quite broad and vast, right? And if you go to focus on like the individual tasks themselves, then you're dropping the ball in the strategic mission that you're running, all right? A project, a program, a product, or whatever. And so the only way you can scale and you keep this train running is to effectively delegate to the rest of your team. You trust them to execute while you are like the pilot and you have this cockpit dashboard that has all these gauges and dials to make sure that everything is still operating well. So I think learning to delegate and when to delegate and to who to delegate is so important, right? That's the only way you can scale.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about scale, right? I was just thinking, if you go to like a good restaurant, there's a head chef. Do you think every dish that comes to your table is made by the head chef? The answer is no, right? He's there to orchestrate it, right? But he's in charge of, like, what to serve, like how to present it. But he effectively leverages his, kitchen staff to, make an effective delivery to the customers, like make the experience authentic, right? So I think the same thing, like I'm just thinking that terms, like if you are a manager, leader, It's the same thing. Your job is to orchestrate with the team and effectively delegate the work to the right people so you get it done.
Man, you're on a roll with these analogies. I love it.
Food analogy specifically.
I know. That's really good. Really, really good. All right, let's talk about why some leaders struggle with delegation. Like what are the mistakes they make?
Yeah, I think, one of it, I read it somewhere, it's equally important to decide what not to do as much as what you want to do as a leader. It's a tough position to be in, like, especially if you used to be a individual contributor and then became a manager. Because the reason you became a manager is because you did a kick-ass job, right? You built something, you did something amazing. Now you're in this new role and you've been asked, like, hey, time to let it go, right? How do you do it, right? So it's challenging, right? Because delegation sometimes could feel like you are no longer that go-to person. It's someone else in your team, right? Am I losing the importance in the role? Like, people are not coming to me. And also on the positive side, some people could feel like, hey, I don't want to add more work to my team. Like, that could be like they're already loaded. Like, I don't want to give them more work. And it could also be like, not knowing how to delegate or what to delegate. I mean, I think that's where the art of delegation come into play.
Let me just add on to what you just said, right? From my perspective, I think usually you're a leader now because you've done a really good job as an individual contributor and you were the go to person, right? And so now, why sometimes you struggle to delegate is because you have this fear of losing control. I think you said that as well, right? Another one is when you see a task, it is very clear to you what needs to be done. And so it's faster for you to do it yourself than to explain it to someone else and have them do it because you in your mind can do it in like very very quickly compared to maybe someone else might take it double the time. So that's a common pitfall. That's a challenge that you have to get over. Another one I would say sometimes lack of trust, right? Where you want to give the task to them, but you maybe haven't worked with them long enough. It's a new team, and you don't have the trust that they will figure it out and get the work done. So that could be another reason why some new leaders, especially, struggle with delegation.
Yeah, those are really good points. And Roshan, the flip side of it, if you don't, effectively delegate, is you're going to get yourself overloaded with work, and you have added responsibilities, and then you need to prioritize work. And what could end up happening is, what I call, passive delegation, is that you don't plan to actively delegate the work to the right people. Instead, just because you get overwhelmed, you end up offloading work to other people, and that leads to a vicious cycle where your team can actually fail.
So spot on. And guess what? You become sometimes the bottleneck, right? The downsides are so many, right? You could become the bottleneck. You get burnt out because you're doing like two jobs now. You're trying to be this leader and thinking of strategy, but you're also doing things because you feel that you are better suited to do that, right? And so you are getting burnt out. You work doesn't become fun anymore, and you're not building your team around you, right? If you're taking on the hard stuff, the team is not growing either. So there's so many bad things that can happen.
Yeah, I think that's all the reasons why you need to have a effective delegation plan. Now, what exactly do you want to delegate? Like I said at the beginning, it's important to decide what not to do as a leader, right? And what work do you want to delegate? And also you should think about, like, aspirations of your team. Like, are there opportunities to, give them stretch assignments.
Yeah. Actually, that brings us to our next topic, which is how to delegate, right? And maybe I can add something to what you just said, like deciding when to delegate, right? There's this matrix called the Eisenhower matrix. So there are four quadrants. On the top left is urgent and important. So usually those are ones that you take on yourself. Fine. You know exactly what to do. The ask is immediate. You can take it on. Then you get not urgent, but also important. Perfect for delegation, right? You package it such that you give them the reason why you're doing this and maybe set the clear outcomes, hand it off to someone else to do it because it's not urgent. There's value in that work, but they can take their time and learn and build their skill set and get it done. There's also urgent but not important, right? Again, these tasks can be delegated to your more productive team members, the ones you trust more, because they will get it done within the time frame you expect and all that good stuff. And then I think the last one is not urgent, not important, eliminators.
Eliminate.
Those are the ones that you said, right?
Yes.
Decide you don't need to do that.
And I mean, you're spot on. I think also, like, if haven't done delegation before, like, start small, right? You don't have to start delegating the biggest, most complex work first. Like, to your point, like, go through that matrix, start small, and then have patience, because the person that you delegate to might not accomplish the task the same way that you did. So therefore, you need to focus on the outcomes, not on how you do it. And then you need to really practice letting go, really being able to trust people and relying on them, and sometimes let people even fail and learn from it, right? That's how, as an organization, you grow. If you are getting everything right the first time, maybe you're not learning, right? Maybe people are not challenged enough, maybe they are not thinking out of the box. So if you're doing something innovative, chances are you're going to fail, right? Because people will try to see, how can I do this even better than how you used to do it? So it's important that you go through this cycle, and the teams, you come to trust the team. They have the best interest at heart.
Asanka, I love what you just said. That is so important. Sometimes you just have to let them fail and learn because the next time they won't make that mistake again, right? They'll learn from that. I really like that. A few other things that techniques that I use also is I try to learn the ambitions of each of my teammates, right? And where they want to get to, what they want to achieve. And then when things arrive, I try to match them with the right person. So they feel personally vested, they're interested. We tell them why this needs to be solved and what is the desired outcome, but give them the freedom to figure it out. Right. And but then the technique is you can't just leave them alone too. You have to have checkpoints and make sure that they are going on the right journey and we can course correct them where necessary. But yeah, that I think that is key. I touched upon this as well. When you do delegate, try and be as clear as possible of what is the goal of this
That's
task,
the key.
right? That's the key. If it's vague, then again you're setting your team up for failure, right? So try and be very clear with your goal. Maybe specify if there's a deadline, specify the deadline. Let them know all the things that are needed to get this thing done, right? So they can make the right trade-offs. Are there other things that you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of along the same lines. Like, if you're the person who get it delegated to, like, if you are not told those things, like, make it a point to get clarity, right?
Yes.
And also ask, like, what does the success look like to you? Like, when I finish this, like, ask the questions, like, hold the manager accountable as well to tell you exactly what's expected. I think it goes both ways, right?
Another one that I've seen, and it goes along with a mistake as well. Sometimes you delegate, but you don't give them ownership in making decisions. Sometimes, right? And that's also, I think, a pitfall. So if you're delegating, give them the ownership. You given the goal, let them make the right decisions um, to achieve the outcome within these constraints that you're given, right? Because sometimes I've seen actually some managers, they delegate but they micromanage because they have in their head this is how it should be done, and they are like on top of the person making sure that they do it that way
Exactly.
rather than allowing the person to exercise their own creativity and come up with a solution on their own.
Yeah. And another one, maybe probably obvious, right? It's not enough to just, assign a task, maybe a challenging task, but also you have to make sure maybe the person doesn't have exactly the right skill set. So provide, resources and training opportunities, or maybe buddy them up with someone who's good at it, to learn from that person. Like, provide tools that are needed, right? So you have to set up the person for success. It's not just assigning the work and expecting it will get done. End of the day, it's your team. You have to make sure you have their best interest.
Oh, that's a really good one. Another one I would say is celebrate these successes. If they do something well along the way, don't wait for the outcome sometimes. Keep them motivated, encouraged, celebrate successes, but be able, like I said, have these checkpoints often so that you're able to give them feedback and guidance and train and coaching to adjust and make changes along the way as well. Another one I would say is this is a thing that we use a lot, which is called trust but verify. So you're trusting that they're making the right choices, but remember, you have the outcome in mind, right? And sometimes it does happen when you give a task to someone, they are so engrossed in the task that they might steer away a little bit from the actual outcome where they want to get to. So you have to keep being that, lighthouse, bring them back, saying, hey, yeah, that's great, but I don't think that's important right now. Solve this first, and bring them back. So keep verifying what they're doing, the decisions and whatnot. I think very important.
Yeah, I think that's where you said like the checkpoints. That's important. Another thing is, I think, you have to give credit where it's due. Like, you delegate something to someone and the person does an amazing job. Like, you have to recognize that person and give credit, not take the credit. Give credit to the right person.
And guess what? That person now becomes your, hopefully, your second in command. You built this person up, they built the right skill sets. You become even more productive because now you can hand off things to these people because you're building a little, uh, autonomous team, right? That they can now execute stuff.
Yeah, I think those are some
Cool.
really good ways to delegate.
Do you want to share any stories about ways you were productive or things that maybe didn't go as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this happened recently. I was catching up with one of my buddies from my previous organization. He used to own a stack of application, like those were really business critical applications. So we were just catching up, and I was asking, how are things with the applications? Because he used to be the go-to person for us, like the subject matter experts. He said, his exact words, I don't do any of them. I said, what do you mean? I have effectively delegated everything. I was like, so I used to be his baby, right? I mean, we used to like go to him for everything. He said, so I said, what do you do? Like, did you change your role? Are you owning something else? He said, no, I still own the same applications, but I'm doing something new. I'm trying to integrate, AI into the application, right? So what he has essentially done is he has effectively dedicated what he used to do, what used to be like his core thing, to someone else, and free up his capacity to do something more strategic for the organization. Because for him, that is like the next evolution of his application stack.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good one, right? Um, I have a similar one, maybe to share. Back in the day when I was an engineer, one of the tools we built was this centralized rate limit solution for all of Atlassian services. So in the beginning, it was like my baby, right? Very similar to what you said, right? So it's about, how we get it, how we solve this problem, how we operationalize it, what does the on-call look like, production issues, everything used to go through me. And then I realized, because now we have built something, but how do we take it forward, right? How do we make it even better? And because if I was so stuck with all these day to day stuff, so I started, dividing work across my team and like had people specialize in operations, in the different algorithms, things like that. And I now was freed up to be able to think, okay, how does this plug into the rest of Atlassian's ecosystem? Where is Atlassian going to be in 5 years? Are we positioned to evolve with the rest of the platform? Things like that. And create a vision so that now there's a roadmap to execute. And guess what? Now the team is also now scaled up, right? And upskilled that they could implement it without even me, right? That thinking was already done, which is I think something I'm very proud of.
That's a great example, Roshan. I want to say something that I did wrong early in my career as well, right? So I had a team. So what I used to do is like, this like, early on when I became like a leader, I used to just divide up the work, right? Chunk it up and, hand it over to different individuals, like based on their capacity. But the work was not getting really done. I was frustrated. It took me a while to figure out like just you can't just hand over work to anybody. I think you have to figure out like is that person's the right person to do it? Like is does he even want to do it? Right? Just because you're the manager, like people just don't do things, right? Or they don't do it effectively when you hand over something. Like so that's something I started learning about, like you said, each individual, like what do they really want to do, what are they good at, what skills do they have, what do they not have. So I started taking down notes, and based on that I redistributed the work, right, and the team became really efficient. Like it took me a while to figure that out. I wish there were podcasts like this for us to educate at that time. I could have avoided most of those pitfalls.
By the way, if you guys like content like this, don't forget to hit subscribe. I have also a learning story similar to that, Asanka. It's quite recent, to be honest. I'm ashamed to say this, right? But my team already had a charter of work to do. And my boss gave me this task of scaling our operations process across our org, right? And what I first thought is, let me not burden my team, right? I'll do it myself. And what happened was, because also of all the other things I already had on my plate, this was like low down on the priority list and it didn't get done. And when I did do a little bit of it, it was not the greatest process even, right? And so when I had a checkpoint with my manager, he was like, think of this as a software problem, break it down into small parts and carve it out to other people. Why are you trying to do this on your own? You don't have the time. And I was like, oh yeah, why didn't I do that? And so then what I did was I worked with individuals from the different teams, had representatives. We had like a brainstorming meeting. The ideas that came out of the meeting were amazing, right? Better than stuff I would have come up on my own. And guess what? We all broke down tasks and said, okay, why don't you take care of this? Why don't you take care of that? And within a week, we were able to operationalize this. It was a good lesson for me without trying to take things on myself and being so slow at it and bad at it. Just use the brain power around me, right? So I think that was a good lesson there as well. Cool. Shall we wrap it up there?
Let's wrap it up. All right. So in today's episode, we spoke about art of delegation. In summary, we mentioned that delegation is a necessary leadership skill that allow managers to really empower their teams as well as free up their capacity to do more strategic things. Uh, there's also we also spoke about the misconception that delegation is not about doing less. It's about really driving the team to do more for the organization. It was active decision making as opposed to passively handing over things to people. And then we spoke about some techniques that worked for us in delegating, and then how to overcome the challenges over a period of time. We spoke about mistakes we did early in the career as well as mistakes we do now, because you have to always actively think about how to best delegate. That's kind of the wrap up.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that, Asanka. And thank you everyone for listening. See you next time.
Bye.